Ooh, are you ready for Stanwyck?
I am always ready for Barbara Stanwyck.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at the clouds, so dark up above. The song in my heart, and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with our rain, I've a smile on my face. I'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain and singing, just singing in the rain, the rain, the rain. Why am I singing and why do I sing?
And why does December seem sunny like spring?
Why do I get up each morning to start happy and head up with joy in my heart? Why is each new task a trifle to do? Because I am living a life full of you. I'm singing in the rain, I'm a melodious rain, just I'm a refrain, I restore the lane. What a grand and glorious feeling, I'm happy, happy, happy again. I laugh at the clouds so dark up above. The sun is in my heart again, and ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase.
I went through the whole list, the 10 films. They'll be
Oh, you
in
did
the
the whole
article.
10.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, I had
All right.
to. I couldn't stop. I was I mean, I had my headphones on watching it when I was like watching the kids.
Right.
I was like, I have to finish these.
Okay. Respect. Wow.
Oh
Good.
man,
That's great,
what?
Kevin.
What a cool job to have. First of all, we have a pretty cool we have cool careers. So
Yeah.
Barbara Stanwyck. Wow. What an
Yeah.
incredible dame.
Yeah. Greatest, as my former students know well, greatest actress ever and for all time, at least in Dr. Nelson's view.
Yeah, it was great. You gave me the 10 films you gave me. I'd seen 3 of them. 40 Guns I have seen obsessively.
Yeah.
But that was interesting because chronologically that's the last one that you gave me.
Yeah.
I believe it was.
Yeah. That's the latest of the movies. Yeah.
We
On the list.
started with Babyface, and which I had never heard of.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, Stanwyck made over 80 movies in a career that lasted almost half a century, and she did transition to television very successfully in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, just a remarkable career. But for our purposes, yeah, I gave you kind of 10 that if you were to watch them, you would get a sense of how her career developed and where she was at different points in time. So Babyface is one of the great, what's sometimes called pre-code movies,
Yeah.
even though it's released just as the production code. So this is a moment when the American film industry, which has always been self-regulating, it's never been the government telling Hollywood what it can and cannot do. It's always been the industry wanting to regulate itself, which is different than almost everywhere else on the planet. So this is a moment where the American film industry is transitioning from one kind of looser censorship apparatus called a list called the don'ts and be carefuls to a much more rigorous, comprehensive, and enforced production code. So there's this brief moment in the early sound period, which we like to call pre-code, because you could get away with certain things that you couldn't get away with in 1934 onward, so to speak, or you had to portray in different ways. So, this is a fairly notorious example of what you could do in the pre-code,
Oh
because you
boy.
have sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna. I was just agreeing. That's what it was shocking to me.
Well, I mean, you have a So you have this poor young woman who, it's very clear, is in an abusive household, that her father has been, prostituting her out from the age of 14. And, her emancipation from this cycle of abuse is to use her sexual wiles to literally sleep her way up to the top of a kind of corporate ladder.
Yeah.
And we, very famously, we see this very literally, where we'll have a scene on one floor of an office building, and she'll have she'll engage a man, and then we'll cut to the outside, and the camera will lift up to the next floor, and we'll go in, and there she is. And so she literally sleeps her way to the top. And of course, there's a lot of character development. She, gains sophistication, but actually, loses something of her innocence. Faces a crisis in the end that has her confront, the costs of ambition. But it's it's kind of a feminist touchstone for its frank depiction of class, gender, power, all those things.
And was shocking to me. It's the only time that Stanwyck and John Wayne were in a film together. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So Stanwyck later in her life, when she's making a lot of Westerns, and Stanwyck always loved Westerns, um, her idol, her screen idol when she was young, it was Perils of Pauline. She always liked stunt women, that sort of thing. So later in her life, she'd always say that her one big regret was that Duke never asked her to be in a picture with him. But, of course, she's forgetting the fact that they're together. And, Wayne is one of the few men that she rejects. She rejects his advances. So I like to think that maybe the Duke just held a grudge that, Stanwyck rejected him in 33. So he's,
Never
he's not going to
forgot
cast her. Yeah.
it.
Yeah. But yes, we get to see briefly a young John Wayne when he's still, finding his feet after the debacle of the Big Trail.
A very brief cameo by John. A very, very young, sharp looking John Wayne.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, a John Wayne we don't really see, because we're used to seeing Wayne really from 39 onward. So it's always I've shown this film in a few different classes over the years, and it's always a surprise when young John Wayne pops up and is then disappears. He's in the movie for like a couple of minutes.
So one of the things Stanwyck, I walked away from this obviously deeply in love with her.
Yeah.
But there were so many emotions, so many different feelings I had along the way with all of these different characters. There were times when the characters were just disgusting to me. And within the same scene, you could just fall in love with her again. What is it? I think, we were talking about it before. I think part of this has to do with her authenticity as an actress.
I think so. And that's a word that comes up all the time when people are discussing her. I mean, we can sometimes, fetishize the idea of, the untrained actor or something like that. And it's not like she didn't have training. I mean, she came out of New York. She's a Ziegfeld girl. She's on Broadway. So it's not like she was just plucked off the street and put in front of a camera. But at the same time, she doesn't have the same kind of formal background that others in Hollywood did. And the direction that she gets very early on. So there's stories about her with Capra, for example, where Capra is telling her essentially just forget the camera, forget the lights, forget everything. Just feel the scene. And, that's what you do, that we feel it along with her. I love what you just said, the idea that you can like fall in and out and back in love with her in a single scene. I think she just, had this kind of great well of emotion, and, the skill. I mean, she was such a professional. That's the other thing people talk about. She knew her lines. She hit her mark. She treated it like a job. She really had that that attitude, and yet the kind of the depths that she could conjure up are are really just remarkable. I mean, she's just a luminous, transcendent screen presence. Um, and yet she's so. I mean, part of that may be the authenticity, and maybe you can tell me what you think about this. Another thing that's said about her is she's kind of like the most Hollywood star. The
Mm,
idea that compared to like a Joan Crawford or a Betty Davis, she didn't seem to have the kind of the Hollywood glamour
mhm.
associated with her in the same way, that she could play all these different roles, but she for whatever reason came across more as a real person. I don't know if was that something like you were feeling? What do you think?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because I've 2 daughters, so, I've a lot of emotion in this house, and
Yeah,
my daughters were and so they know Audrey Hepburn, they know,
right.
Debbie Reynolds, a lot of the big Hollywood actresses, and the way they engaged with seeing Barbara Stanwyck was interesting because their heads kinda tilted sideways, and I think it was for that reason. I mean, she doesn't have the mid-Atlantic accent.
Yeah,
Uh, she can play those parts that maybe wouldn't look natural for Audrey Hepburn, for example.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
that's a great point. I mean, I didn't put this on the list. We can maybe talk about why that is, but like in the Lady Eve, you get the sense that
Oh,
she's the type of performer who can perform being high class, but we really know that she's from the streets.
yeah.
Like this idea that she's still Ruby Stevens from Brooklyn. Like this is still the girl who saw a drunk bump into her mother on the streetcar at age 4 and saw her pregnant mother, fall off the streetcar and die. Like
Wow.
like her back. Like this is a woman who a story that I find I like telling because I think it says something about this other person. She has purportedly had an encounter with Al Jolson backstage on Broadway, and Jolson is propositioning her, and she's rejecting his advances. And the story goes that Jolson, who is a real piece of work,
Yeah.
talented performer, no question. Apparently, put his either cigar or cigarette butt out on her skin, and she
Oh,
just stood there and took it until she passed out. And it's
wow.
like, when you see her, you feel like, that's who this really is, that she can play all these different characters, but we know that there's this sort of honesty, this toughness, this woman who has walked the hard road. I think she brings that to her character. So it may be, that she just kind of had this well she could tap into that, you know, um, I mean, everyone has hard times, but I mean, she had a really tough upbringing, and she made it work. And that affected, I think, her performances as well as her general outlook on life.
That, is a good so we've got Babyface, and chronologically, we have Annie Oakley next, but for
Yes.
me, that jump was interesting because you have with Babyface, you have, like, to me, a literal siren who, like, the men are trying not to look at. Like,
Yeah.
and the
Medusa.
yeah, yeah, and then you have Annie Oakley,
Yeah.
which to me is like, she's like a saint.
Yeah. I mean, the emotional sincerity, combined with a kind of athleticism almost.
Yeah.
So the continuity could be a kind of a keen sense of her own physicality. I mean, she has this really diminutive figure. She was famously the same size for her entire career. But she's so tough. But I mean, to your point, yes. I mean, those films are 2 years apart, and the roles are diametrically opposed in many ways.
So we have 3 films on the list with Fred MacMurray, who I love.
Yeah,
I love him, man. Just like the way he speaks makes me happy.
yeah. I mean, Fred MacMurray is a great performer that because of certain films he made late in his career. the Shaggy Dog at Disney, for example,
Huh.
he kind of, matured into a kind of a, you know, humorous father figure towards the end of his career. But when you look back, and especially you look at some of the films he made with Stanwyck, he had great range, as did so many of the
Yeah.
great Hollywood stars. And he's very famous for his pairings with Stanwyck. So the most famous, of course, I don't think there's any question about that, and maybe Stanwyck's most famous role is Double Indemnity, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to mix it up a little bit and throw in a film like Remember the Night, or a
Yeah.
film like There's Always Tomorrow, to just give you a sense of not only Stanwyck's range and how she develops, but that Fred MacMurray, that she just had this great on-screen chemistry with him. They made a Western together called The Moonlighter, which I didn't put on, which is not as
Oh.
good. But actually a 3D Western from the 50s.
Huh.
Not a great picture, but has some very good moments in it between the two of them. But yeah, I mean, Fred MacMurray, like his performance in There's Always Tomorrow is, it's just devastating.
Yeah, it's
Just,
tough.
well, and so that's a Douglas Sirk film from 56. And, we think of Sirk and we associate him with these really kind of lavish color melodramas that he made at the time, like Written on the Wind, Magnificent Obsession, Imitation of Life. But he also made these, smaller, shorter black and white melodramas at the same time. And so for my money, There's Always Tomorrow, which is, MacMurray plays a family man who reconnects with an old love
A toy
who has
maker.
become, right. Who's become, yeah. So he's a toy maker, Robbie the robot. So he, reconnects with this woman from his past who, is a very successful fashion designer. And they, kind of rekindle something, but the film is a very mature, really mediation on compromise.
Yeah.
What we give up, like actually giving up love in pursuit of stability and family and so on. It's I just find it a devastating film, and their performances together are just remarkable. It's worlds away from Double Indemnity, where they're both playing highly morally suspect characters. Yet the chemistry just transcended genre, I guess we would say.
Yeah, that's a good I hadn't even made that parallel, but you're right. Because I think, of the list, There's Always Tomorrow was I watched that last night, so that was, like, number 8 in the 10, and
Sure.
I was kind of suspicious. Like, I was like, "When is she gonna do something that
Yeah.
reveals some dark secret?"
Yeah. When is Phyllis Dietrichson going to show up? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Or,
but
or Jessica
it was
Drummond or whoever.
I I was, like, cheering for them over the family life, which was, like, I felt very conflicted about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really powerful film in many ways, and a complicated one. So, it reminds us, that Cirque, had a lot of range, but it's really, it's the performances of those two that really set it apart.
So what makes Stanwyck such a natural in film noir?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Putting aside, the matter of film noir and whether, how we define it and what it is and what it may not be. I mean, her turn as Phyllis in Double Indemnity is, maybe her most iconic role, and certainly, helps establish a lot of what we associate with the femme fatale, right? So this is, the character that emerges in the post-war crime film, or, films like this one that are just on this, the war is wrapping up or ending no, not really ending, last couple of years. Let's be clear there. This idea of this kind of predatory female who, is kind of a temptress, and we know that no good can come of any association with her. And, and oftentimes the man is choosing between different female archetypes, and, the femme fatale, at least in film criticism or theory, is sort of read as an expression of post-war anxieties. The idea that we had during the war, all of these empowered women, women going into the workforce, doing masculine jobs. And, one expression of this anxiety is the emergence of this particular character. Well, what happens when these women get this kind of agency and power? Well, they become, vampires, essentially. Um, but, I mean, as much as, Double Indemnity is an important film, I think that Phyllis is archetypal in some senses. She's using a man to her own personal gain, but she's also kind of chillingly human because she's not pure evil.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some femme fatales that they're just like the explanation is just, they're just evil, right? They're like they're just straight from hell. But she's a woman who is kind of caged, by, class, marriage, opportunity. Like it's the first thing we see of her, the shot of the anklet is important. Symbolically, it suggests her kind of entrapment by her circumstances. And she sees a way to kind of break the shackles, literally. So it's a great film, but it's a better film than it has maybe been reduced to when we put it in this box of film noir. And again, so much of that is down to the chemistry between the leads, but Stanwyck in her blonde wig is just, oh man, the lust, greed, the betrayal, like, oh, I man, you don't blame Walter Neff, the character, for falling victim. I mean, what man
Oh,
wouldn't?
yeah. I don't blame any of the male characters. None of them. I get it, man.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so speaking of caged women,
Okay.
Sorry, Wrong Number.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Wow. What a movie.
Yeah. So this is, Stanwyck was nominated for Best Actress Oscar 4 times. This is the last time. So she never won a competitive Oscar. She gets
Wow.
which is, so often the case with the greatest performers. It's almost like if you never win one, it's because you were great, and like her roles, you wouldn't, no one remembers who she lost to or why. So this is it's a towering performance. It's not quite a one woman chamber drama, let's say, but it kind of is. It's adapted from a famous radio play, and it has an interesting connection with film noir because she kind of both is the femme fatale, but is also the victim. So for folks who haven't seen it, that it's a kind of a classic setup where, she overhears something she's not supposed to on the phone. And she, she's bedridden, maybe because she's actually ill, or maybe not, maybe it's psychosomatic. But her attempts to get people to come and help her her pleas for help are met with incredulity, let's say. And so, as she pieces the puzzle together and people don't want to come and help her, it's just, the tension just, ratchets up. I don't know. I assume that was your experience too.
Definitely. Yeah. It tightens up and just the soundtrack, obviously, but that interplay of like light and dark. It's just, it's such a beautiful film.
Yeah, I mean, it's well directed. So that's Anatol Litvak, great filmmaker. Yeah, it has to go on. It has to go on the list. It's a really important film, and I think it's it's useful to see next to a film like Double Indemnity because you get a sense of her range even within films that we might group within the same genre or style or trend.
Yeah, definitely two completely different films.
Yeah.
The Sorry, Wrong Number. I could tell that it was originally a radio play, you said?
Yes, radio. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could tell it was either a stage play or written for radio and then fleshed out.
Yeah.
Just the paralysis of being stuck in that room.
Yeah. Well, it's the rare film that, a lot, keeps us locked in, aligns us with the subjectivity of the protagonist. I mean, where we don't, really know a lot more than she knows. And it's the rare film that can actually sustain that for the entire running time. Like oftentimes a movie will, they'll restrict us to what a character knows, but then we'll get some piece of information they don't, and the film becomes less about, suspense, and it becomes more about, well, when are they going to know? When are they going to figure it out? When are they going to know what we know? This is the type of movie where we learn with Stanwyck, we piece it together, and we're with her, right up until the very end.
The very end. Yeah, and it was fascinating how many flashbacks they were able to do. Flashbacks in flashbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like labyrinthine. And, my
Yeah.
understanding is that a lot of those were things that they added to sort of flesh it out as a motion picture, as opposed to the radio play.
So totally changing course to Ball of Fire.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think the connective force in a lot of these, and maybe all of them, is that they feel so Shakespearean. Like, there's a lot of eavesdropping, there's a lot of love, there's a range of emotional connection.
Sure.
And Ball of Fire sort of reminding me of a Shakespearean comedy.
Well, it's, yeah, I get that. I could see that, kind of like in the mode of A Midsummer Night's Dream or something.
Yes.
I mean, the plot is kind of a play on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Right, because you've got this group of bachelor academics hard at work on a comprehensive encyclopedia, a compendium of all human knowledge, each devoted to their own specialty. And you have the grammarian, who gets to S for slang and finds that he can't. But so he's kind of the Prince Charming, she's Snow White, and then there are the seven other academics who are the Seven Dwarfs.
And Gary Cooper as a dwarf, as one of the Seven Dwarfs.
Well, I guess he's maybe more Prince Charming, let's say, in this particular case. But
yeah, he would definitely be Prince Charming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had not thought of that. And it's amazing how many times I've seen Snow White that I didn't piece that together.
Yeah. Well, it's just something that's said. I mean, this is great script. This is a Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett wrote this together. But it's you've got a great, you've got a kind of Billy Wilder script, but then it's Howard Hawks with his signature, rapid fire direction. You have Stanwyck is that kind of typical Hawksian woman that you and I have talked about when we talked about Rio Bravo. It just has, so many great elements. So I said earlier that I put this in instead of the Lady Eve. It's a tough choice, but I like Ball of Fire better than the Lady Eve. I feel like in Ball of Fire you get a better sense of Stanwyck's range. You get a dance number, and I really like Gary Cooper in this. I really like Cooper as the kind of the bumbling academician.
Yeah, it was an interesting role to see him in. And so that was the choice that you had to make between the Lady Eve or Ball of Fire.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I think most people would have picked. You got to pick your top 4, your top 10. I think most people are going with the Lady Eve, but I guess I'm being controversial here by saying no. Ball of Fire is the better movie. That's
I'm
where
glad you did that.
That's where you want to start, and hopefully the haters can let me know.
No, I was really, that's why I always, anytime I have a question about cinema or film, I turn to you because you're going to give the nuanced, because I would have just written about the Lady Eve.
Sure.
So, and I probably would never have watched Ball of Fire.
Happy to be of service.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Especially with Gary Cooper and Dan DeRea, right? As a gangster.
Yep. Yeah, well, so you get Stanwyck in a role, nightclub singer, hiding out from the police, seeking refuge and in the most unlikely of places, and that is the wellspring from which comedy flows, and it flows pretty steadily for the whole running time of the picture.
What do you think Stanwyck would be? Because when I watch her movies, I just think, man, it's such a shame that she hadn't been born like 30 years later or 40 years later.
Yeah,
I don't know if we can even do this, but what would she look like today as a leading actress?
that is a great question. I mean, I these kind of I like these thought experiments. I think one of the
Yeah.
challenges is that her longevity. She was able to act for so long, and I think one risk of me giving you this list, for example, is you could watch them and you could think, okay, well, maybe there's a kind of career arc where she goes from these pre-war pictures about emancipated women, and then you get these post-war pictures where it's more about what is the woman's responsibility. We get those through the 40s, and then you get into the 50s, and it's more about a woman being, comfortable with her power, having recognized that she's made sacrifices. It would be, very easy for me to make some kind of narrative like that. But at every step of the way with Stanwyck, you could point to a different film that might upend some of that, teleology. And that's what I guess helps to make it so, confounding but endlessly fascinating. What would her career look like? I mean, this is people who know me are going to groan at this, but I wonder if she wouldn't have had a career something more like Gillian Anderson.
Uh,
And I don't say that because they're both stunning petite redheads.
yeah.
But I think of somebody like Gillian Anderson's career
Yeah.
where like so many really great actors in the 90s, doesn't break in through film, breaks in through television, and then has some very really good film roles, but then mostly continues to be associated with television in a range of things. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe simply because of the resemblance.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have made that connection. I didn't really know who it would be. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
and
Who would you have said?
oh, man. Oh, I'll have to think about that.
I
I
think. I
think it
mean,
would be I think it would be an actress who was in a Lynch movie or, something like
Like
that.
Laura Dern.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
She would fit in a Tarantino movie. Um, that's I don't know why I'm thinking more through the lens of the directors that would,
Hmm.
grab her up quickly
Yeah.
because of her talent.
I guess I mean maybe part of it is I just thought of television because she just works so much. I mean,
Yeah.
like as a film actor in sort of mainstream films, you just can't make that many movies anymore, as much as you might want to. So TV is kind of where it seems like this where these workhorse actors end up.
I
But
just
and that's and it with Stanwyck, that's where she ended up. So after her film career is sort of waning. In the 50s, she's the star of an anthology program, The Barbara Stanwyck Show, wins an Emmy, and then she's the one of the leads on The Big Valley. She finally gets her own Western series in the late 60s, and then she's on to what is it, The Colbys.
huh.
So she keeps working, into the 1980s. Really, it's just remarkable. I mean, there's nobody like her. One of my favorite quotes is from a great film scholar named Robin Wood, who says something to the effect of, when I see Barbara Stanwyck, I know that women are strong.
Oh, man. That's powerful.
Yeah, I can't
Okay,
say it
so
much
this
better than that.
this gave me a crazy idea. Barbara
All right.
Stanwyck as Carmela Soprano.
Right. Sure.
That's
Yeah.
in a different universe.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think, I mean, would she have been home at HBO? Yeah.
Ah,
I mean, I know that, so Stanwyck, is an interesting, off screen is interesting. And, maybe
yeah.
we'll circle back to this in a future podcast, but, she was very private, um, very private. She, by most accounts in real life, smoked like a chimney, drank like a fish, and swore like a sailor. Was conservative, was a member of the Motion Picture Alliance for American Ideals, and her thought was that, she had raised herself up from destitution without the help of the government. And if she could do it, then, and it worked out well for her, then surely anyone could. So, politically, she's an interesting person. And yet, she was very, very, I guess, proper in some ways in the way that she handled her business. So it's, it's hard to wonder what these actors would have been like if they were, given some of the freedoms that we see on premium premium cable television in the 90s.
Oh, everything you just said will definitely be a future discussion.
Sure.
Stella Davis or Stella Dallas. I don't know why I kept doing that. Stella Dallas.
Yeah. That I would get one of her defining performances. So this is 37. So this is, I mean, part of that kind of straw man teleology I propose, this would be the moment where we transition away from the roles like, babyface. So this is a, working class woman who, marries above her station. So there are some comparisons there, but, the focus becomes how, she becomes painfully aware of how society looks down on her, how there's nothing that really she can do. And she pours, she becomes increasingly estranged from her husband. And in a way that she kind of has to, release him.
Yeah.
She, pours all this energy into her daughter, Laurel, played by Anne Shirley. It's just, it's a complicated film.
Very.
And, it's a film of contradictions that I don't think are actually contradictions. So one thing, since you've just watched the movie, there's, so one of the kind of the subplots is that, Stella is this incredible seamstress, right? And she makes, from scratch, these beautiful contemporary dresses for her daughter, Laurel, effectively allowing Laurel to pass as being, maybe from a different class than at least half of her is from. And yet there is this incredibly difficult moment in the movie when Stella and Laurel, they're at a kind of a resort, and Laurel's out during the day enjoying herself. And, Stella doesn't want to come out of her room. And we know why, but she,
Yeah.
eventually, gets up the courage to do so, but she, dresses in the most garish fashion imaginable, makes a spectacle of herself, embarrasses her daughter. It's just incredibly, painful to watch. So the question is always, well, how can this character who is able to make the most fashionable, chic dresses for her daughter not know how she is supposed to dress? Right.
Yeah.
It seems like, because actually so much of the movie hinges on this, like this is a major turning point in the plot. But, one possible answer is that, she's kind of, she's internalized all of this class consciousness, and she's like self-sabotaging herself. And she continues to do that for the rest of the movie, that unconsciously and then consciously she's doing things that she, that will, push her daughter away from her. So it's, it's just such a tough movie, right up to a very famous ending, which, we don't have to spoil for your listeners, but it is a tour de force performance, I mean, and one of those really early indications of just what a commanding talent Stanwyck was. It's a tough film to watch. I can only watch it
Very
ever so
tough.
often, as much as I love it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that though, that I was just looking for an explanation as to why she kept doing that. The sabotage, it seemed
Yeah,
like it didn't really add up, and I think it doesn't until the last moment,
yeah.
or it didn't for me at least. And in that last moment, I was said, "Well, that's quite a sacrifice," but I still don't understand
Yeah.
why she chose to sabotage like that.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we can come to a satisfactory answer. And that
Yeah.
the last moment of the film is so so emotionally fraught. The movie wants you to believe that the last thing we see is Stella, smiling. And, we're supposed to think, oh well, it was worth it. She believes it was worth it. She made all these sacrifices for her daughter. Again, not going into too many specifics here, but I feel like, and maybe this is part of the power of Stanwyck's performance, that this is a film that cannot contain all of the drama, the emotion that it is conjured up largely through her performance. It's like her performance is bigger than this movie, and these Hollywood conventions. We're used to Hollywood films, especially of the classic era, the 30s, the 40s. Really, wrapping themselves up in the end very neatly and quickly. This is a great example of how that containment just doesn't work, and you're left kind of haunted, where it just doesn't add up to you. And I think so much of that is down to Stanwyck's transcendent performance.
Yeah, it reminded me, I kept forgetting that this was, 'cause this, what was this, 35?
37.
37.
Yeah.
37. So, it reminded me of a lot of the women protagonists that we see in, like, Cassavetes
Oh,
movies.
sure.
Like,
Right.
a woman under the influence
Under
is
the
kind of
influence.
like, was the similarity I felt.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, so the difference would be that with Stella Dallas, and this is a difference from many movies. It's not like there's some kind of she's not an alcoholic, for example,
Hmm.
right? Like it's not the idea that she has some kind of moral failing or sickness, or that she's subject to something unjust. I mean, that's what makes it such an interesting counterpoint to a film like Babyface, because she does it. Working class woman, marries above her station through some machinations, for example. Like she achieves it. And there's a separate conversation to be had about these types of movies where the women achieve it and then are told they can't have it.
Hmm.
Even though maybe they should have had it, maybe they deserved it. So in that way, there's not that kind of crutch, right, that we're so accustomed to in more contemporary storytelling, where like, oh, this person had a sickness or an ailment or an injury or some kind of impediment, something beyond their control. I mean, what makes a film like Stella Dallas so devastating is that she did it. Like she jumped over all the hurdles.
Yeah.
She made it, and she has this beautiful daughter, and yet the boundaries of class just simply cannot be broken. I mean,
Hmm.
like this is not the type of movie. This isn't like this isn't It's a Wonderful Life, where
Yeah.
a character has his life destroyed repeatedly over and over again, never gets to achieve his dreams, and yet in the end, realizes, oh, it's a wonderful life after all. I hate that movie. Like, I really dislike It's a Wonderful Life. Like, I have
Yeah.
similar, I have similar reservations about The Wizard of Oz, because that's a similar
Yeah.
movie where it tells you oh, the fantasy that you have of escape from tornado ravaged depression era canvas. Like, you don't need to go to Oz, because everything you want is in your own backyard. Like it's a very pernicious message if we think about it
Huh.
in the context. So even though Stella is kind of gesturing towards that, like, the noble sacrifice, it's because of Stanwyck's performance that you know that it just doesn't add up, right? Like
Huh.
there's just an injustice here, and you leave. Oh, yeah, I'll say it again, just devastated. I'm just devastated when I see these movies. And what I love about it too, the ending, is that I've shown this movie to teenagers, 20 somethings today, and I'll turn around and they will be weeping, like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It retains that type of that type of power.
I mean, that the amount of emotional depth required as an actress in front of a camera to express something without using her words at all, which is like really sad and really beautiful. And there are about 10 major emotions coming
Yeah.
out of her all at once. That's
Yeah.
astonishing.
Yeah. Well, you know, Stanwyck could famously cry on demand.
Wow.
So, you know, so you can imagine, you know, to have that tool in your toolkit, right? Where you can conjure up these tears, but then you can pair it with whatever you want, and you can change it like that. You know, this isn't, you know, she's not a method actress who needs to like spend all night thinking about her dead dog in order to cry, right? Like this is a pro. And
Yeah.
so, you know, when King Vidor says it's time to cry, you know, she can do that, but she can also do all these other emotions too. It's not to minimize, again, the fact that she has experienced all of them, like experienced them in a way that most method actors have not. But she, you know, she's a pro. So, so you get, you know, as you know, you kind of led off with this idea that you're on this roller coaster. Almost every scene she's in, she just contains multitudes. You know, like it's just, I don't know, a sight to behold.
So she was born in New York. Is that right?
Yeah. So she grows up in Brooklyn. So 1907, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. 1907. 1907.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, is poor, large family. I mentioned before. Her you know, pregnant mother dies tragically when she's young. Father disappears, and she's kind of, you know, she bounces around families and relatives, is kind of raised by an older sister in her family, but there's a lot of moving around. Um, you know, finds her way into show business, you know, which is, you know, not uncommon for people who have terrible backgrounds seeking that kind of escape. So, you know, finds her
In New
way.
York or in LA?
So in New York. So
Okay.
she debuts as a Ziegfeld girl when she's 16. And
Gotcha.
then she's acting. She has lead roles by the late 20s, 27. She's in a film, a play called Burlesque that kind of establishes her as a star. She also is in a relationship and marries a very, you know, important early comedian named Frank Fay, and together they go to Hollywood, and because he's, you know, they're going together to look for opportunity. And this is an abusive relationship by most accounts. And when they get there, Faye's career, you know, quickly tanks. Whereas, you know, Stanwyck is, you know, she's not found, but at least, you know, identified by Frank Capra. He casts her in Lady of Leisure. That leads to Babyface, Night Nurse, Bitter Tea of General Yen. You know, it's kind of, there isn't necessarily proof of this, but the A Star Is Born story about the you know, the older established star who finds this ingenue and kind of mentors her, but then her career takes off and just goes down. A story that Hollywood has now told like 5 or 6 times. That's, you know, supposedly based on Stanwyck and Faye.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, may not be true, because there was a lot of stories like this
Yeah.
where, you know, the younger woman takes off and the older, you know, established male star doesn't. And, you know, this part of this is also the transition from silent to sound, but, you know, it certainly makes a good story, and it helps. It's just another way that Stanwyck is enmeshed into some of these sort of, you know, the Hollywood mythos, let's say.
That's funny because that's basically what happens in Annie Oakley.
Yes. Yeah. Only they stayed together in the end. Like there's a happy
Okay.
ending in
Yeah.
that, you know. It's not like one character, you know, walks off into the sea or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I confess I didn't see the Lady Gaga version, so I don't know how Bradley Cooper meets his demise, but does he walk off into the sea in that one? I don't know.
Probably. I
Yeah.
didn't see it either.
All right.
I'm like, I feel relieved that you haven't either.
Well, you know what? Yeah, there's thousands of old movies I still have to see, so, you know, I've only got so much time left.
Um I didn't know Lady Gaga did a version of Annie Oakley.
Yeah, so so not Annie Oakley of A Star Is Born. Sorry.
Oh, of A Star Is Born. Okay, yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
Yep. I know. I was all over the place.
yeah.
So here's one that I
Yeah.
know you'll have a couple things to say about.
Okay.
40 Guns.
40 Guns. Definitely one of man, what can we say about 40 Guns? One of the great westerns. I really believe this. If I had to make a top 10 list, probably 5 of those movies would vary depending on the day, but there would be some that are set, and 40 Guns would would stay there. It isn't all Stanwyck. It's a clever story. It's a great, sophisticated, funny take on the Wyatt Earp mythos. It's probably Barry Sullivan's best performance. Sam Fuller is at the height of his powers. He's doing things visually and stylistically that anticipate Leone. Well, not really anticipate, that actually Leone steals. It is heavily eroticized, but
Yep.
but at the center of this is Stanwyck's, Jessica Drummond, black clad, whip in hand, astride a white stallion, leading her 40 armed gunmen across the Arizona plains. It is just one of the great westerns, and and that's really a testament to Stanwyck. She loved westerns. She made a lot of them for a woman, especially in the 50s. Not uncommon for women actors of her age, her vintage, to turn to more genre roles. But she just had a knack for the western. So whether that's in The Maverick Queen, or Cattle Queen of Montana, or The Furies, Great Man's Lady is an earlier movie. I mean, she loved westerns, but this unquestionably, like the peak of her western powers, was Jessica Drummond. Amazing film, hilarious film, smart, clever, funny, just everything you could want this movie to be is there, and it's all, and she is the sun around which the entire movie orbits.
Oh, I mean, I know I felt this way, but I can imagine decades of men have felt this way when watching this. This sensation of, oh, I don't know anywhere near as much about women as I thought I did. I didn't know this was possible.
Yeah. Well, it's a great example in that way of what the Western could be. Something you and I've talked about, that when we think about the Western, we take 30 years when it was the most popular genre, we shrink it down to High Noon, Shane and the Searchers, and
Yeah.
we forget just the possibilities, the kind of the craziness, the things you could get away with in a Western. So it's a nice reminder of that. But yes, I mean, it's also a reminder of the space that the Western had for women. At least women like Stanwyck, who had more balls than the men around her.
So how did this girl from New York, how did that translate onto the film as a Western actress?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, so again, when Stanwyck is young, she talks about watching Perils of Pauline. So these are adventure serials, silent adventure serials, cliffhangers, right? Where heroines, spunky young heroines, will find themselves in some kind of life or death fix, and they'll get out of it. And there's a lot of horseback riding, a lot of stunts. Stanwyck, famously, whenever it was feasible, did her own stunts. So, in 40 Guns, she's 49 years old, 50 years old at this point, and she's still being drugged across the ground, holding on to the back of a horse. It's really her. You get that commitment to authenticity. So I think she just grew up at a time when the Western was just a part of cinema, and it's something she wanted to be a part of, and it wanted to be a part of in a way that wasn't just being a damsel in distress, let's say. And she has a few of those roles early on. Annie Oakley, we talked about, The Great Man's Lady, for example.
Yeah.
terrific overlooked Western, just amazing film. But in in the 50s, these type of roles become much more possible, and she plays this kind of cattle queen archetype across multiple of them. Going from the Furies through to this. So we might say, well, yeah, what is this? What does this little girl from Brooklyn know? Well, very few Western stars are from the West. Like John Wayne. What is this kid who was born in the Midwest but then grew up surfing in California? Like what does he know about riding a horse? And the truth is he didn't know that much about riding a horse. That's not what the Western is about. Like the authenticity isn't, for the average person, isn't about is the saddle accurate? Did the Indians really have that type of blanket at that place at that time? It's more of an authenticity of maybe a verisimilitude, let's say, a believability that this person could have existed at that time because they had the grit necessary to make a go of it. So, which I guess, as I say, it is kind of like the real West. I mean, what's the West? The toughest, the rowdiest, the dreamers, the scoundrels found their way west and tried to make a go of it. So maybe that's
Yeah.
Hollywood. I don't know.
Oh, I love it. No, it is funny because you have actors who obviously tried to play Westerns and just never really could.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, certainly, we think of Stanwyck kind of in this Warner Brothers corral. So, some of her, I guess, male contemporaries in the 30s, your Cagneys, your Bogarts, Warner's puts them in Westerns and it doesn't really work out for them.
Yeah.
But it's something that Stanwyck loved, and she came back to, that the Western was receptive place for her. There are Western themed episodes of the Barbara Stanwyck Show, so that's an anthology show where she kind of awkwardly introduces each episode. She's in a ball gown. It's kind of amusing to watch. But then she stars in a lot of them. And a lot of them are Western stories, and then you get the Big Valley, where unlike Bonanza, it's not Lauren Green as the patriarch. It's her. She's she rules the ranch on the Big Valley.
Man, I need to. I'll put that on. I need to watch that. Yeah, you got me hooked on Stanwyck. You got me. So, one thing that was interesting, of the 10 films, all of them were black and white.
Yes.
Is that sort of her terrain?
Oh, that's funny. Thought didn't even occur to me when I was putting this together. Because she certainly makes color films. I mean, that's how we know she has that famous red hair. Is that her terrain? Huh. I've got you. This is great. I love this. What did you think? So you noticed that these were all black and white, even though we're into the 40s and 50s. What did you make of that? Was it like maybe black and white plays to her strength somehow?
Yeah. Honestly, I forgot that she had red hair. But yeah, that is an important part of Barbara Stanwyck. Yeah, I think I just was in sort of, I mean, I love black and white. I think that was part of it. It feels so warm, and it that's sort of what it lent itself to me. Like, this adds to her warmth.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's the kind of, the irony is that when you drain something of color, it seems more, lively or colorful or something like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I guess I'd have to think a little bit more about that. Cause I'm even thinking about some of the films I could have added, but didn't. And a lot of those are black and white too.
Huh.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, Technicolor was an expense, and I wonder, I don't know. I wonder if filmmakers thought it wasn't worth the expense. I'd have to think about that. I mean, there's one sort of really comprehensive biography of Stanwyck, written by Victoria Wilson. It's a doorstop of a book, great book, but it only goes up to 1940. So we've been waiting for years now for the second half, and that second half is where that might be addressed. Yeah, God, great food for thought. If I think of a good answer, I'll let you know. But it's kind of
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
kind of befuddled
Well,
at this point.
this This was reminding me of being back at college
Huh.
and this exciting experience of, you know, I think part of it is I did this with Shakespeare as well, where it was
Right.
like I focused on it for a week straight and then listen to what a professor had to say, and then got to ask all these questions that I had while doing the readings.
Yeah.
So this was really cool, man. I appreciate you giving me your insight on this because this was a lot of fun.
Well, there's a long, tradition of this idea of the kind of the saturation viewing. That's the myth of the French New Wave, right? That,
Yeah.
Godard and Truffaut sat in the Cinematheque in Paris and they just sat there and watched and watched and watched, and that was their film school. That's the reason I always insisted when I was a academic of, doing the screenings in person, making people watch the movies, that communal experience. There's something to be said for, kind of that condensed viewing, that kind of shotgunning all of these films, reading about them. I mean, you come to appreciate the art in a way you don't if you just kind of dip in and out. So I kind of really heartened to hear you say that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really awesome. As difficult as this is, do you have a final word on Stanwyck?
A final word. Only that I am going to imagine for most of your, listeners and readers, she is probably an unknown.
Mm.
So, I would just encourage people, even if you've maybe seen Double Indemnity, maybe that's the picture people are most likely to see. But that film is so old now. I think, just, take heart that you have the amazing opportunity to discover the remarkable work of the greatest actress who ever lived. Like how exciting is that? And she made so many movies, dozens and dozens. That's the amazing thing about, all art history. It's like, there's so much for you to discover. So if, folks haven't seen Stanwyck, I mean, you get to fall in love with her for the first time, and I envy you.
Oh. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, if anyone happens to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, you can swing by the Western Spirit Museum in Old Town. I'm there most days of the week. So, ask for me at the desk. Love coming by, talking to folks. I'm at andrewpnelson.com and Andrew Patrick Nelson on Instagram.
And it's on Instagram you have was it Saturday, Soft Rock Saturdays?
Yes. Yeah. So I do.
Okay.
Yes, I have been doing for close to 2 years now. Every every Saturday is a soft rock recommendation. And, I know, you published a kind of, massive piece about yacht rock. So maybe we can
Oh,
circle back to that one day.
oh,
But,
big time.
so every Saturday you get my soft rock pick. And then every Monday is Hair Metal Monday. And so that's, almost 2 years worth of song recommendations, no repeats. No, I have not repeated a single band yet, which is an indication of just how many amazing hair metal acts there were back in the 80s and early 90s.
What a legend. All right.
Conflict, plunging them into nature's most devastating whirlpool of destruction, the tornado.